In this edition of ETTV, we will be looking at Disclosure Project, some more information from Sixto Paz-Wells, the speech at the Toronto conference of former Canadian Defence Minister Paul Hellyer, and we'll also be looking at the testimony of Gordon Cooper, whose team filmed a saucer landing at Edwards Air Force Base in 1955. But first, here's Joanne with some opening words.
The truth that is known to be out there may challenge all your currently accumulated constructs of life. The disclaimer to this probability is that it's not my fault. I didn't invent the truth, but I do present it simply for your inspection, and you can make up your own mind. And, the chances are this may make you feel a bit wobbly around the edges, but, this is perfectly normal, and in a few days you'll feel much better. In the meantime, it may be helpful, I think, to, talk to people about it, have a nice cup of something soothing, rescue remedy, chocolate, whatever works for you. But for the moment, how about just relax? Grab a beer or a coffee or whatever. And enjoy.
We begin our programme with a short interview with a man known to be a straight-talking, no-nonsense type. Gordon Cooper, Mercury astronaut who died in October 2004, here gives his account of the filming of a flying saucer landing at a US Air Force base in 1955. This clip comes from a documentary called Out of the Blue, which is available on DVD from Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk. Gordon Cooper was also a witness in the Disclosure Project, from which we will hear more testimony later in the programme.
He was supervising the filming of a precision landing facility for F-86 fighter jets. Suddenly, a saucer-like craft flew directly over the cameraman. 3 landing gear apparatus opened, and the object landed on the dry lake bed.
They're just typical saucer shape, double lenticular shape, metallic. And they went out, picked up their cameras, and moved on out toward him filming. And he lifted off, put the gear back in the well, and climbed out at a very high rate of speed and disappeared.
The subject matter most requested since the Freedom of Information Act was passed is by far related to all aspects UFO. The following was released mid-November 2005, and as you can see, there is still plenty that is deemed too sensitive to be disclosed.
The document shown here was generated in response to a Freedom of Information request to the National Security Agency regarding their knowledge of events where UFOs were tracked on radar. The highlighted paragraph reads, "This document was discussed in paragraph 20B of my public affidavit. It is entitled UFOs and the Intelligence Community's Blind Spot to Surprise and Deceptive Data. In this document, the author had discussed what he considered to be a serious shortcoming in the agency's comment, that's communications intelligence, interception and reporting procedures. The inability to respond correctly to surprising information or deliberately deceptive data. He uses the UFO phenomena to illustrate his belief that the inability of the US intelligence community to process this type of unusual data adversely affects US intelligence gathering capabilities." For more documents like this, visit www.blackvault.com or www.majesticdocuments.com.
Lo importante es que un periodista español.
The more important thing was a newspaper man from Spain.
Nos acompañó en estos encuentros.
They accompanied them to the encounters.
Y vio aparecer las naves.
And he saw appear the spaceships.
Y tuvo el valor de declararlo públicamente en España.
And he was brave enough to declare in Spain.
Y esto hizo de que el grupo de contacto fuera conocido a nivel mundial.
And that's what making the contactees to know around the world.
A lo largo de los años tuvimos la oportunidad de subir físicamente a sus naves.
Through the years, they got the opportunity to go in the physical body to the spaceships.
Y recibir de parte de ellos mucha información sobre la historia de nuestro mundo.
And getting a lot of information about the history of the planet Earth.
De por qué vienen aquí.
Why they coming here.
Qué es lo que buscan.
What they looking for.
Y qué es lo que nosotros podemos esperar de nuestro propio futuro.
What we can waiting for the future.
Pues ellos dicen que nuestra galaxia, la Vía Láctea,
according to them, the galaxy or the Milky Way, yes,
sí.
Milky Way.
Tiene un gobierno compuesto por 24 seres.
They got the government which composed by 24 elderly people. Elderly beings.
Sí, y,
elders.
Y debajo de ellos hay todo un orden jerárquico de civilizaciones.
And behind them is a lot of hierarchy organizations, different organizations.
And are these organizations orchestrating how the cosmos is organized?
Esta organización es para solamente nuestra galaxia.
This organization is only for our galaxy.
Sí,
okay.
Pero cada galaxia tiene su propio gobierno y sus propias jerarquías.
Each galaxy has got different governments and hierarchies.
Entonces hay un grupo de galaxias que giran en torno a una galaxia central.
Different galaxies traveling or going around to the main center galaxy.
Esa galaxia central para nosotros es Andrómeda.
That central galaxy is called Andromeda.
Andrómeda.
Yeah.
Y cada uno de estos gobiernos
and each one of these governments
tiene un representante en la galaxia central de Andrómeda.
They got a government representative government from each galaxy in the center, in Andromeda.
Entonces en Andrómeda existe un consejo que ellos le llaman el Consejo de los 9 de Andrómeda.
And the center is a council from nine main beings.
Right. Okay.
Y la relación que hay entre el Consejo Central y los consejos locales.
The connection between the central council with the rest of the other ones, the other constellations.
Ellos le llaman la Gran Hermandad Blanca la Estrella.
They call them the White Brotherhood from the White Star.
No, the Star.
The Star.
The star?
The star. The star. The 5 points.
Oh, okay.
Like a star.
The 6 points.
6 points the star, sorry.
My name is Graham Bethune. I'm a retired Navy commander, pilot, had a top secret clearance. 50 years ago, February the 10th, 1951, I was flying from Keflavik, Iceland to Argentia, Newfoundland. It was at night, it was dark. About 300 miles outside of Argentia, I saw a glow on the water, like approaching the city at night. As we approached this glow, it turned to a monstrous circle of white lights on the water. We watched this for a while. The lights went out. There was nothing on the water. Next thing we saw was a yellow halo, small, much smaller than whatever it was launched from, and that was 15 miles away, up to our altitude. Because of the trajectory, I disengaged the autopilot, shoved the nose over to try to go under this thing. At that time, I heard a noise underneath. I thought maybe it hit us. It was actually some of the crew members ducking, and they collided, and a couple of them were injured. Then it appeared over to the right and moved out slowly and flew with us. It was still not at our altitude, but we could see the shape of it. It had a dome. We could see the coronal discharge. I went back aft, let the other pilot, Al Jones, take my seat to see what the passenger's reaction was. Came back to the cockpit, told him not to report anything simply because what the psychiatrist had said to me, maybe they would lock us up. So basically, the instruments in the cockpit, we had 4 or 5 failures. In the area of magnetic compass, the electromagnetic effect, an area of directional finders, and this type of thing. The craft was tracked by radar in excess of 1,800 miles an hour. It never did get to our altitude. We had 31 passengers, plus the psychiatrists and the crew members that all cited this at different areas. When we landed at Argentia, Newfoundland, we were interrogated by the Air Force, an excellent interrogation, Captain Paulson. When we landed at the Naval Air Test Center here at Patuxent River, we were required by Navy intelligence to make out individual reports. Out of the National Archives, I have the 18-page official Navy and Air Force report. I've made up a report to straighten out all the truth. There's a stack of books out there this high that have written all of this up. So the truth is here. I will testify under oath before Congress that everything that I have said is true.
My name is John Maynard. I'm a retired Army. I retired as a Sergeant First Class. For my entire 21 years of service, I held a top secret clearance. Compartmentalized at times to as high as TK, Omni, Crypto, and others. I had access to very, very sensitive documents. My testimony is basically two-pronged. One, I retired from DIA in 1980. And when as an administrator you take over an office, you take over everything and you sign for everything. And I signed for well over 2,000 documents. In order to sign and inventory those things, you have to read them. Not word for word, but basically I went through every document to make sure that it was complete. It was there, as they told me, that when I turned my charge over to the next person, the same documents were there. So I got quite a good knowledge of what was going on in those documents, and believe me, there are many, many different references to UFOs. There was also NPIC pictures that shows that it would targeted objects that were casing you out. Now, I worked on the SALT 1 and SALT 2 areas for the office that I worked in. So we were taking pictures all the time for verification of nuclear disarmament. And there were some objects in those pictures that didn't belong there. The second prong to this whole thing is that a lot of people talk about conspiracies over a shadow government. I'm willing to testify before Congress that these black operations do exist. I nearly became part of it. But I saw the light, I think. Or was it? And I got out. And that's it. We have to disclose what we know. And I am willing to testify before Congress under oath, or before any other organization, that what I witnessed was true.
On September 25th, 2005, Paul Hellyer spoke at the Exopolitics Conference in Toronto about the reality of UFOs. He actually said, UFOs are as real as the aeroplanes that fly over your head. That is my unequivocal conclusion. The sound quality of this video is rather poor due to some technical problems and the fact that it was filmed with a small camcorder without a special microphone. Mr. Hellyer starts here by referring to the testimony given by airline personnel pertaining to UFO encounters as seen in the US documentary special UFOs Seeing is Believing, which was broadcast in February 2005.
Commercial airline pilots, United States Air Force pilots, policemen, public officials, all swore they had had personal encounters with UFOs. Some witnesses alleged that they had been abducted. Why would they say what they said if they didn't believe what they were saying? I concluded that anyone with an open mind would have had to be convinced by what they saw and heard. It may have been that program that encouraged me to read a book that had been on my shelf for a couple of years. It is titled The Day After Roswell and was written by Colonel Philip J. Corso, the U.S. Army intelligence officer who had been a member of President Eisenhower's National Security Council and later head of the Foreign Technology Desk at the U.S. Army's Research and Development Department. It was one of the most fascinating books I have ever read. It is the unimpeachable source of what I am going to say to you today. The longtime intelligence officer confirmed, beyond any shadow of doubt, the long-circulated rumor that on or about July the 4th, 1947, a UFO crashed not far from Roswell, New Mexico. 2 or 3 of my friends have asked me if I do think that the day after Roswell could be just some brilliant work of fiction. My answer was no. Not even with the imagination of someone like Jan Martello, author of The Life of Pi, could anyone take it. The book is replete with too many real names, real places, and real dates to be fiction. I shared a few of the comments with my nephew Philip. Not having read the book, he was more than a little skeptical. A couple of days later, he phoned a retired United States Air Force general of his acquaintance to ask him about the book. Every word of it is true and more, the general told him. That was enough to satisfy Philip, who could hardly wait to get his hands on a copy of the book. Last Tuesday, I decided it would be good to hear that assurance firsthand. So I phoned Darrell, who Philip had introduced me to at an aviation exhibition a few years ago. He seemed pleased to hear from me. So I asked him about the quote concerning Corso's book. Every word of it is true and more. He repeated for my benefit. We then spent 20 minutes or so discussing the quote and more. To the extent that he could, without revealing classified material. What he said was just as fascinating and just as compelling as the book. UFOs are as real as the airplanes that fly over your head. That is my unequivocal conclusion. But that conclusion alone would not have been enough to convince me to speak out today. Others will be saying the same thing, and some of them better. The reason I am going public today is because there are profoundly important policy questions that must be addressed. There is a problem for Earthlings. Within hours of the crash of Roswell, U.S. General Nathan Kleiman designated the visitors as enemy aliens. It appears from his book that Colonel Corso agreed with that assessment, that it has remained as official U.S. policy ever since. At that time, however, it was an enemy, quote unquote, about which the U.S. could do nothing, because the visitors were so technologically superior. That led to the recommendation that the discovery be treated with the utmost secrecy, to the point that the crash at Roswell didn't happen and that UFOs don't exist. The rationale was that the ordinary public couldn't cope with the news and might easily panic. Reference was made to Orson Welles' Halloween broadcast depicting the Martian invasion, which had been so realistic that it created a sort of panic. The best way to prevent a recurrence was to keep the public in the dark and unaware. This policy resulted in what has probably been the greatest and most successful cover-up in the history of the world. In his book, Colonel Corso makes it clear that the Reagan administration's Strategic Defense Initiative, appropriately dubbed Star Wars, was primarily designed for use against the alien intruders. His contemporary successor, the anti-missile defense system, is also being designed with that as one of its principal objectives. The time has come to lift the veil of secrecy and let the truth emerge so there can be a real and informed debate about one of the most important problems facing our planet today. Forgive me for stating the obvious, but it is quite impossible to have that kind of an informed debate about a problem that doesn't officially exist. Meanwhile, visits from our interplanetary neighbors present opportunities for peaceful communication and collaboration. Who knows? That could be just the antidote the world needs to end this greed-driven, power-centered madness. Thank you.